doctor gonna write? Together we will fight.
Benoit Saint-Denis confirms he will be taking on Mauricio Rufy September 6th, UFC Fight Night Paris, so Benoit will have the home nation fans behind him. It's a dynamic striker in Rufy against a relentless pressure fighter in BSD. Early on, expect Rufy to come off fast using explosiveness and creativity. If he lands clean in the first round or two, especially with head kicks or counters, he could finish the fight quickly, but if Saint-Denis can survive that early storm, the tide could shift. BSD is known for walking through damage to get to his opponents, using relentless pressure, clinch work, and takedowns to grind them out. He excels in drawn-out, gritty fights, and he has the cardio to push a brutal pace for 3 rounds. It is dangerous running into the fire against Rufy, but if he can survive and Rufy starts to fade, Saint-Denis will likely take over with top control elbows and submission threats. Rufy has a decent chance to get a KO in the first round and a half, but if he doesn't, Saint-Denis is going to look to drown him into deep waters and get a late stoppage or decision. So Rufy versus Benoit is Fighting Nerds versus a Frenchman, and so is the main event. Kyle Bahayo from Fighting Nerds taking on French fighter Nassourdine Imavov. Bahayo has a cerebral, control-heavy style using grappling and cage awareness to shut opponents down and win rounds with positional dominance. Imavov, however, is more dynamic in terms of the striking, sharp boxing, fluid movement, and a knack for mixing in timely takedowns, although he's probably not going to do that against Bahayo, who's pretty slick on the ground. Fighting in front of his home crowd, Imavov may look to pressure early and test Bahayo's striking defense. Bahayo will likely try and neutralize that aggression by dragging the fight to the mat. If Imavov can keep it standing, his volume and accuracy could edge rounds, but if Bahayo's able to impose his grappling, it may be frustrating for the Frenchman. This matchup could hinge on who controls the pace and where the fight takes place. Winner gets a title shot against the winner, DDP versus Hamzat Chimaev. If one of those guys don't make it to the fight, Bahayo's stepping in as a replacement. Martin Buday picked up a win over Buchecha over the weekend, and he moved up 1 spot in the rankings to number 12, but he's no longer on the UFC roster. He fought out his UFC contract after that fight, and the UFC didn't offer him another contract, so he's gone. He had a 7-1 record in the UFC and 16-2 overall. He's a solid fighter, but his fights aren't extremely memorable. Like, he's won 3 in a row, but it was decision, split decision over Arlovsky. But maybe a little surprising UFC let him go just because the heavyweight division is so thin to begin with that I'm surprised that they're letting people go. Like, Waldo Cortez Acosta might be fine for a title if he picks up a win next week. Some reactions: 7-1 in the UFC and still got released. Crazy. That's ridiculous. Heavyweight has never been worse than it is now. The organization needs a guy like Ngannou to come back, and unfortunately Dana White hates him and he will never work with him again, which is a shame because Ngannou seems like he wants to come back to the UFC. Other than that, you got guys like Rug, but he's the 1 championship champion, so they're not going to let him go. And Malikin's fighting him for the belt and won as well. You got Henan Ferreira, but he's in the PFL. And also Vadim Nemkov with the PFL, but he has expressed interest in going to the UFC. So some fans think he shouldn't have been cut because that 7-1 record, and also the UFC division and the heavyweights is so shallow as far as why he might have been cut. I don't know, he's just maybe just not exciting enough for the UFC and like just too expensive to keep on the roster. Some fans get up in arms when they see guys like this get cut, but at the same time, they also may not be very interested in seeing their fights when they are scheduled. Martin Buday says, yeah, it's true. Yesterday we got the call that UFC is not re-signing us for the moment. Well, it is what it is. At least I'm leaving with my head up. Thank you. Buday could maybe go to 1 championship or PFL, but a lot of people complain about not being able to get fights in the PFL and 1 championship, so maybe there's some other organizations he can go to. Michael Morales says, what are you waiting for to sign, Rocky? Talking to Leon Edwards. So Morales and Edwards likely being matched up by the UFC, and Morales is waiting for Edwards to sign. They're moving in different trajectories in their career. Morales is 18-0 coming off back-to-back wins, first-round knockout wins over Magny and Burns, whereas Leon Edwards is coming off back-to-back losses. Just like a year ago, Leon Edwards was on top of the world, and now some people are calling him washed after back-to-back losses. So things can change really quickly, and if you're the champ, you really got to maximize your earnings during that period because things can change fast. Leon Edwards is now ranked number 4 in the division, and Michael Morales is ranked number 7. This division is very intriguing, especially at the top. There's on any given day, there's a bunch of guys who could be fighting for the belt, and the guy fighting for the belt next isn't even a welterweight. It's Makhachev moving up from 155 to 170 to challenge JDM, probably November in New York City. Bilal Muhammad wants to fight Kamaru Usman next. They have never fought before, and they have a beef. Sean Brady, number 2, wants to take on number 3, Shavkat Rakhmonov. Brady suggests November in New York City. Shavkat, in his personal life, his wife and son were involved in a serious car crash, so I don't know if he's physically and mentally ready to compete right now. They were released from the hospital, but November is when Brady was looking to fight before that crash recently happened. Ian Machado Gary could take on Joaquin Buckley, number 6 and 8 at welterweight. They were matched up in December, but it didn't go down because Buckley ended up fighting Colby and Gary ended up fighting Shavkat. Number 10 ranked Gilbert Burns was called up by number 13 ranked Daniel Rodriguez, who's fresh off a victory over Kevin Holland via decision. Number 11 and 12 in the division will be fighting in a couple weeks' time. Jeff Neal versus Carlos Prates, UFC 319. August 16th, Chicago, Illinois. The UFC Rio card on October 11th. That fight night card has added Bia Mesquita, 5-0 Jiu-Jitsu phenom, making her UFC debut against Arina Alexeyeva, the Russian Ronda, who's coming off a loss last month via decision to Claudia Saigala. Alexeyeva will likely look to use her striking, and Bia will look to take the fight to the ground and get the rear naked choke. In MMA, that's been her go-to sub. That Rio fight night card on October 11th is 4 more fights on it so far. Vitor Petrino versus Thomas Peterson in the heavyweight division. Julia Polastri versus Karolina Kowalkiewicz in the strawweight division. Lucas Rocha versus Stuart Nickel at 125. And in the heavyweight division, couple heavyweight sluggers. Janata Denise, 9-1, taking on 10-0 Mario Pinto. Tom Nolan will be taking on Evan Elder in the lightweight division on September 27th. Some think these guys look like cousins or brothers. They have both won 3 fights in a row. Farid Basharat versus Chris Gutierrez at the T-Mobile Arena October 4th. At UFC 320, some think it'll be a technical striking battle. Some think it'll be a staring contest, to each their own. Fight of the month, UFC picks Magomedov versus Barrio. I would have went with Rodriguez versus Holland, but some thought it was Poirier versus Holloway 3. Interestingly, neither fight won fight of the night at 318. That went to Vettori versus Allen, which was controversial from the fans' perspective. Dan Hooker thinks they may end up doing Paddy Pimblett versus Ilia Topuria for the belt. He thinks that would be the smartest fight for Ilia Topuria because that would be the easiest fight and biggest payday for him, in his opinion.
Funny thing is, they might actually do Paddy, which is like an absolute piss take, where he fights Chandler and then gets the title shot. Is like an absolute piss take. But who cares at the end of the day? Like, he's not going to hold the belt for very long. Like, and also, if you're in Ilia's shoes, like, logically, he should be fighting Aman, but he's not going to because Aman's a really tough fighter. And if I'm sitting there with the title and I'm getting pay-per-view points and I have to fight Aman Sarukian, Justin Gaethje, or Paddy Pimblett, well, I would take the hardest guy. But if you're smart, all right, you take Paddy Pimblett. You're going to get the most money because there's a lot of animosity. You're going to get the most money and the worst fighter. So it's like a win-win situation for Ilia Topuria.
In this October